Hello and welcome to this webinar. This webinar is called Energy Security in the EU, Responding to the Effects of the Ukraine Invasion. I'm Ergun Idrissa. I'm a senior researcher and research coordinator at EsadeGeo, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before I get started, let me just thank the Repsol Foundation for their support for this event, which is of course an important one, because we are here to talk about the Ukraine invasion, the shock this has caused to the energy system in the EU, and the EU and member state responses to this crisis. As we know, energy prices and natural gas prices in particular were already high when Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th this year. Since then, however, they've spiraled, and this has led to major concerns about the impact on the economy, as well as new concerns about security of supply. At the same time, of course, as we know, Russia was, at the beginning of this year, the largest oil, gas, and coal supplier to the EU. And this relationship has led to Russia receiving over 50 billion euros in fossil fuel payments from the EU since the war began. So to address the current crisis, the EU has put together a series of sanctions packages. It has initiated the path to an exit from Russian fossil fuels. And this started with coal. Just yesterday, it was extended partially to oil. The natural gas has remained one of the more difficult commodities to address, particularly given infrastructure and price constraints. The European Commission has been working full speed ahead, of course, on addressing the crisis. And just 2 weeks ago, they launched their REPowerEU plan, which works out in far more detail some communications and conclusions that we had seen already coming forth in March, for example, or at the European Council in Versailles. And the aim here is really to eliminate this dependency that the EU has on Russian energy imports. Specifically then, talking about REPowerEU, this plan that was launched on May 18th, the central objective of the plan in the near term is to end Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels by 2027, and for gas specifically, to cut consumption of Russian gas by 2/3 before the end of 2022. At the same time, however, REPowerEU takes a broader perspective, and so it does fit together with the larger energy and climate goals of the European Commission and the European Union. And so it aims to secure long-term sustainability, affordability, and security of supply. Now, the plan is very, very wide, very comprehensive. We won't go into all the details of it right now, but suffice it to say that essentially it's operationalized through 3 pillars of action. One is demand reduction. Saving energy is, of course, a straightforward, well, not an easy, but a clear way to, of course, reduce our dependency. Diversifying energy suppliers, and as well accelerating the rollout of renewables. So REPowerEU really does represent a significant policy overhaul. Its consequences can be far-reaching. The targets have been updated. There is a strong timeline, and that will require a steep increase in the speed and scope of action in many areas, beyond some of the action that was already laid out in the Fit for 55 package, what was presented last summer and that is currently under discussion. Further on, talking about geopolitics, of course, REPowerEU will change the panorama of the EU's energy relations, its geopolitics. So as you can see, there are many topics to discuss related to this plan, and I'm really happy to announce that we have a great set of speakers to start to dig into some of these aspects. Now, it was announced that Ms. Tatiana Marquez of the European Commission would do the keynote speech for today. Unfortunately, due to unforeseeable circumstances, she is not able to join us from the start of the event, but we are in contact with her and we hope she'll be able to join us towards the end. But in the meantime, there is no need to worry. We have a set of fantastic speakers who will be able to bring us great perspectives from their expertise and their industries on this REPowerEU plan on the measures to reduce dependency from Russia. Let me introduce them to you, and I'll start off with Adolfo Aello. He is the Deputy Director General and Director for Climate and Energy at Eurofer, which is a position he's held since July 2015. He leads the advocacy and the technical work on climate and energy issues there, including on the emissions trading system, carbon border adjustment, renewables, and energy efficiency. He has more than 10 years experience in Brussels-based trade associations on these topics. I'm sure he's well-versed and ready to guide us through some of the implications of REPowerEU. Thanks for joining us, Adolfo. So I will then also introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ana Alvarez. She is the head of European Public Affairs and the head of the Brussels office for Repsol. Before this, she led Repsol's PMO for the Next Generation EU funding program, focused on energy transition and digitalization. Ana joined Repsol in 2003, and she's held several positions in retail, wholesale, distribution, as well as global corporate divisions. Welcome, Ana. And our last speaker for now is Agata Strachota. I'm not sure I pronounced your name correctly, Agata. Feel free to correct me afterwards. She is a senior fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies, the OSW, and she focuses on energy policy. So her areas of expertise are the oil and gas sectors of Russia and the countries of the Caspian region, Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe, and the Balkans. She's a specialist in the energy dimension of international relations and energy policy in the EU and the post-Soviet era. So as you can see, I think we have a fantastic set of speakers who will be able to really delve into a lot of the important aspects of this plan, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their views. So before we get started, let me also welcome our audience. We're really happy to have you with us today, and we will be taking questions towards the end of the webinar. So please do join in. You're welcome to post your questions via the YouTube chat, and we will be taking those questions towards the end of the webinar. But now, without any further delay, let us start with the comments by our panelists on REPowerEU, and I'll start with Agata today. So Agata, thanks for being with us. You, of course, are specialized in EU energy policy, oil and gas sectors in Central and Southern Europe. You're very well placed to talk to us specifically about the dependency on Russia and how this plan will mitigate that. So please, the floor is all yours. Please tell us, what are your views on the REPowerEU plan and its implications?
Good morning, and thank you a lot for inviting me here. Welcome to all the participants and the guests. And indeed, these are important topics and questions. So war, Russian unprovoked war against Ukraine has been a shock to the EU and a kind of a turning point, changing a lot in European landscape, including on energy level. And as you said, Russia has been, at least until last year, key supplier of energy resources to EU. It supplied like 40% of European gas consumption and almost a third of European oil imports, so that's a lot. Russia also invested heavily in European strategic energy assets, in pipelines, in gas storage sites, in refineries. And EU is the single biggest market for Russian energy exports. Russia exports about 3/4 of all of its gas exports to Europe and over 50% of its oil exports. And when it comes to value of these exports, it's even more. So, as you already said, also European answer to Russian war on energy level has been from the beginning to get rid of the dependency on Russian energy resources, and that was for at least two reasons. First was to stop financing Russian war. You said how many money are we sending each day? In fact, to Russia, but Europe also aimed to get rid of own vulnerability. And as you said, there are different actions here. There are sanctions. There is this REPowerEU plan, which is more structural attempt to change EU energy policy and relations in energy with Russia. And then there are individual actions by member states. When it comes to sanctions, indeed, we have sanctions on oil aggregate. They will come into force in mid-August. These just announced sanctions on oil, which this is big success that they are there, but which are not perfect. They will focus only on seaborne imports of Russian oil and oil products, and there will be several exceptions, and then they will enter into force at the end of the year. And currently there are actually no real discussions about sanctioning Russian gas. And let's remember that European sanctions, not only energy sanctions, but also other, are met with Russian counter-sanctions. And when it comes to energy, one of such counter-sanctions was this demand for EU customers to pay in ruble for Russian gas supplies, according to newly designed scheme for payments. And here we had no united answer or approach on the EU side. There were different reactions, and that all resulted in Russia stopping supplying gas to Poland, Bulgaria, Finland, Denmark from today, and Netherlands. Companies from these countries refused to pay it according to this scheme in rubles to Russia. Yet, supplies continue to many other European countries as companies from Germany, Italy, Austria, or France agreed to pay according to the scheme designed by Russia. These difficulties in agreeing sanctions, different approaches, expected Russian retaliation, and generally increased uncertainty in the market due to war, due to danger of physical damage to oil and gas infrastructure, etc., means continued increases in prices, continued volatility of prices of gas and energy in Europe, and we already experienced high prices and volatility before the war. Additionally, there are also expectation of gas supply shortages in wintertime. So the second pillar of this European answer is, as I said, REPowerEU package, which is a sign of structural change in EU way of dealing with Russian energy. In March, we had European Commission publishing the REPower plan for the first time, and it announced then this quite ambitious reduction goals. By two-thirds to limit dependence on Russian gas by the end of 2022 and to get rid of it by 2027. It seemed quite ambitious. Right now in May we had European Commission presenting new package of proposals, more detailed proposals, and in this package these goals are not that strongly pronounced as earlier. Key actions foreseen are related to preparations for this winter via gas storage obligation, diversification, different kind of activities here, and energy savings, but also the actions aimed for mid and long term, which again include diversification, energy savings, but most of all speeding up energy transition and more ambitious goals here. And in my opinion, how the EU and all of its member states, including these weakest, most vulnerable member states, will survive this winter and probable crisis and possibility of Russia using its energy weapon against Europe will be one of the key determinants of feasibility of mid and long-term ambitions of European Union in energy and overall Green Deal strategy. So there is the question, what exactly will be EU institutions' role in it? How strong will be European cooperation and practical solidarity in it? And the success here would, I think, push forward implementation of these more ambitious goals and policy aims, and if we fail here, there is increased risk of greater divisions, individual actions by member states to protect their energy sectors, vulnerable customers, economies, societies, and that may end in bigger fragmentation of your energy policy, etc. So the question is, what are the preparations for this winter? And as we know, probably the success is that the gas storage obligation rules are agreed. There was agreement reached in May between European Parliament and the Council. And so we go forward with that. We see that countries and companies struggle to fill storage side, yet it is less clear if and in what extent all EU countries will manage to fill their storage to the level required by November. It is also not evident how effective will be, and if used at all, one of the key instruments designed by European Commission to enable filling this storage, that is the Common Energy Platform and Voluntary Joint Purchases Mechanism. As for now, we know only about Bulgaria and Greece interested in using that and declaring this interest. Yet it seems crucial that big players join in order to aggregate enough demand for this instrument to make a real difference. What we know also is that some alternative gas is available. We heard about US-EU discussions and more US LNG coming to Europe. We hear that Norway is ready to produce up to 15-20 BCM more of gas until the end of the year. We hear that Israel probably will be able to start exports of its gas to Europe by the end of the year. So there are some alternatives. Yet we have to remember that gas market remains tight and will get tighter in autumn-winter time. So that will be a challenge. There are also challenges related with infrastructure, with import infrastructure, but also with internal European bottlenecks related, for example, to interconnections and not enough capacity available, for example, between France and Spain. And if it's not resolved, it will present a challenge to good fair distribution of alternative supplies, to rerouting flows, which could be really needed, especially in crisis times. Now we saw that primarily just after the war broke, EU and European Commission especially played a big role in shaping European Union's answer to Russian war on Ukraine, also in energy field. And European Commission had clear initiative here, and it was endorsed by, for example, this extraordinary energy council in Versailles. Yet right now it seems a bit that this role is slightly diminished and that there are more pronounced individual actions by member states. For example, we see Germany, but also Italy actively seeking new gas contracts, the request for floating LNG units, etc. And that presents a risk of member states competing against each other for the same resources, for richer winning over the poor, etc. And then last but not least, I will come back to this ruble for gas scheme proposed by Russia and lack of united, coordinated answer from the European Union. And it's in fact increasing internal EU divisions, which weakens the EU, its unity, its effectiveness, also in preparations for this winter. So I would stop here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Agata, for a great overview. Of course, there's so much to talk about here, but what I've really kind of highlighted from your intervention is the focus from the short to the long to the short term, right? So the short term is kind of what REPowerEU, the initial focus. The long term is, of course, the energy transition. I think you made some really important points about the significance of the feasibility of this plan for the longer term for the EU. So thank you for highlighting that. And thank you as well for your reflections on the short term, on what is happening this winter, what is coming up. All right, so we have some great starting points. Let's move forward, and now we're changing towards energy companies. So from kind of energy geopolitics and a wider view, we're moving to Ana Alvarez. So Ana, you are here representing, of course, an energy company, and I know that you must be watching very closely the developments related to Ukraine and the measures to address this crisis very closely. So could you share with us your views on your initial views? I know, because this is a very big plan to digest, your initial views on the REPowerEU plan.
Oh, hello, Marie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be in this panel today. Very interesting panel. The invasion of Ukraine is having far-reaching economic consequences for the whole world, and especially for Europe. This war scenario has brought to the forefront the urgency of ensuring our energy autonomy. Although the energy supply and price imbalances that we're experiencing today in Europe have been caused mainly by the invasion of Ukraine, they've also been accentuated by the lower investments in gas and oil in recent years, and also by the price of CO2. These imbalances highlight the consequences of not calibrating the impact of energy policies. The European and also member states authorities are taking urgent measures to alleviate the effects of the energy security crisis that we are experiencing. The REPowerEU plan has a clear objective: rapidly reduce dependence on Russian fossil fuels and fast forward the green transition. The plan is focused on demand reduction, diversifying natural gas and oil supplies, and also accelerating energy transition by supporting new technologies such as green hydrogen and the deployment of renewable energies, primarily towards electrification. The great challenge we face, the European energy sector and also regulators, is to transform our industry to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, while still providing society with the energy needs, obviously at an acceptable cost. Decarbonization must come from a gradual planned reduction of fossil hydrocarbons, also renewable generation and circular economy, and taking into account low carbon fuels and CO2 capture technologies, which do not seem to have a clear relevance on the REPowerEU plan. The relevance of a principle of technological neutrality is paramount. I will construct on three specific topics of the REPowerEU plan: one, energy savings; two, accelerating hydrogen; and three, financial support, which tackle the need for a technological neutrality approach as a clear opportunity to address REPowerEU's main objective: achieve energy independence from Russian fossil fuels and accelerate transition. Firstly, REPowerEU calls for energy savings and energy efficiency in all its form to be promoted as the most important step in the short term. REPowerEU proposes to increase the target set in the Fit for 55 Energy Efficiency Directive regulation, which is currently being discussed in the Parliament and also in the Council, from 9% to 13%. In order to meet this goal, it will be necessary to account and promote savings and efficiency in industry. To this end, all energy savings should be encouraged, regardless of the technology or the energy carrier used, particularly as energy savings on fossil fuels provide a cost-effective pathway to reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. According to Eurostat data for the year 2019, more than 50% of industrial energy consumption comes from fossil fuels, where the 4 member states, that's France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, have the highest consumption in this sector, average a percentage of almost 60%. In the specific case of Spain, there are sectors that even exceed these rates, such as the chemical, non-metallic minerals and constructions, which are on round about 80%. So, to achieve the increased ambition in energy efficiencies proposed in REPowerEU, it is absolutely necessary to encourage efficiency investments in industry, including the field of hydrocarbons. My second point is with regards to the acceleration of hydrogen in REPowerEU. REPowerEU clearly aims to accelerate the clean transition and, by joining forces, aspires to achieve a single, more resilient European energy system. One of the levers through which it intends to accomplish this is by diversifying energy sources, in particular by increasing the consumption of renewable hydrogen as an energy source to replace natural gas and oil in transportation. However, vehicles on our roads, aircrafts, ships are not ready to consume hydrogen as drop-in fuel quite yet. The replacement of the fleet takes time and a large investment. Therefore, we need to look for an alternative so that deployment of the renewable hydrogen market takes place in the desired time. This alternative is to introduce renewable hydrogen into the fuel molecules that are compatible with the current fleet. For this to be incentivized and for the renewable hydrogen market to take off as soon as possible, it is necessary that its use and its as an intermediate is recognized in the regulation that is currently being discussed in the Parliament and the Council level, RED, Refuel Aviation, Refuel Fuel Maritime. In terms of production, the European Commission is showing a very clear ambition in REPowerEU to bring forward the entry of renewable hydrogen, setting a target of 10 million tons of domestic renewable hydrogen production by 2030. In order to achieve this very ambitious goal in hydrogen production, renewable hydrogen projects need an incentive for rapid deployment. It is necessary to improve the flexibility in the additionality requirements to consider hydrogen as renewable, which are defined in the published Delegated Act recently, and then is now open to public consultation until 17th of June. And finally, my third point constructs on the recovery and resilience plans mechanism to finance the REPowerEU plan. The Commission invites Member States to add a specific chapter to the 16 recovery and resilience plans, setting out new actions to meet the REPowerEU objectives. This new chapter could be an opportunity to explore new reforms and investments to provide support for measures needed to reduce dependency on Russian fossil fuels and also accelerate energy transition. A lot will depend, though, on how Member States adopt those reforms and investments in the current national plans already being implemented. A detailed framework probably should be defined by the European Commission in order to maintain a level playing field within the European Union. As part of the investment in the REPowerEU chapters in the resilience plans, there is a great opportunity for Spain to promote the development of low-carbon fuels, which are a cost-effective and a quick solution to reduce CO2 emissions and also to reduce dependency on Russian fossil fuels. Low-carbon liquid fuels can be used immediately in the internal combustion engine vehicle fleet and also existing supply infrastructure. And will also accelerate electrification in combination with plug-in hybrid vehicles. So, in conclusion, the REPowerEU plan presents opportunities through ambitious proposals to accelerate investments and develop a resilient and clean European energy system. However, the incredible short time frames set to achieve independence from Russian fossil fuels has suddenly raised the level of the short-time challenge. It is necessary to take quick action by prioritizing and supporting industrial projects that contribute to energy security objectives in the short term, using the resilient and recovery plans and increasing the flexibility of the national mechanisms that would facilitate and accelerate a rapid implementation. Europe wants to be the driver for the rest of the world on climate change with its Green Pact and the Fit for 55 package. So we need to rely on all the technologies and solutions that exist today and to invest in innovation to develop solutions that are still emerging. The principle of technological neutrality is now more important than ever, I think.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks so much for your intervention. I think you also started off with kind of this overarching challenge of climate neutrality by 2050, which of course we need to keep in mind as we look at these short-term measures. But you've really kind of helped us to dig a little bit closer into these ambitious short-term goals and the routes to their implementation. So that's been great. Thanks a lot for making these points on energy efficiency, hydrogen, and the recovery and resilience facility. So we will move on now to Adolfo, and Adolfo is here representing for us the European steel sector, which of course has been heavily affected by the increase in energy prices that we've already been discussing. So I'm sure that that the steelmakers of Europe are looking very closely at the REPowerEU plan and its implications. Adolfo, would you like to give us your views on the plan?
Thank you, Marie, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the kind invitation to this event. Indeed, the steel sector is one of the major manufacturing and one of the most energy-intensive sectors within Europe. We are actually the first manufacturing sector by emissions under the EU emissions trading system. And of course, it's not only energy intensive, but also highly exposed to international competition because steel is a globally traded commodity. So when it comes to the subject of this event, before entering the details, please allow me to give a perspective about the situation of the steel industry with regards the energy price spikes of the last weeks and months. Of course, this has been, as it has been said already in the first intervention, this is not something that started in February with the war, but actually it started already before. And in our sector, we have already experienced over the last 6 months production cuts, curtailments, suspension of productions and idling. The situation has deteriorated, and of course it depended on several elements and criteria, in particular on the energy intensity of the individual plants, on the structure of the energy contracts, so those exposed to short-term contracts were those first hit, and also by the steel market dynamics. So we had relatively good market dynamics until end of last year, which have deteriorated in the last weeks and months. So that is to say that the steel industry is under increased pressure, like any sector, of course, since the beginning of the war. And this situation can deteriorate quite badly in the next months, unfortunately. Now, when it comes to the REPowerEU, this is, of course, a very delicate exercise, an urgent exercise, which, from our perspective, needs to balance, on one side, a top-down assessment of what must be done due to the new geopolitical context, and bottom-up technical assessment of what can be done in the shortest time frame possible. This is the balance between the two is not to overrule the first one, so what must be done, but it's only to understand the gaps between the two elements, so what must be done versus what can be done, in order to accelerate and increase the pace of investments. Now, our short comments on the REPowerEU. Let's say on the structure of the three pillars, energy savings. There we have some reservations with regards the structure of the energy saving policy that we have in Europe and the energy efficiency, which is an energy efficiency directive, but it's rather an energy cap directive, because the target has a total cap on the energy consumption. So there we are more concerned by energy savings that could be linked to reduction of production rather than to energy efficiency. At least in our sector, we are very close to the technical limits of the current technologies. And also, what needs to be taken into account is the fact that on one side, some measures are aimed at energy efficiency, short-term energy efficiency, but in many cases, we have major breakthrough technologies that need to be upscaled by large sites. So in this case, these sites will rather go for breakthrough technologies than for short-term energy efficiency measures. So one needs to also take into account this a technical challenge for the companies. On the second pillar, the diversification of supplies, we fully welcome, let's say, the target of the Commission to diversify energy sources. And there, what is also important is to not only diversify from a global perspective, so vis-à-vis third countries, but also to improve the interdependency across and within the EU, because there we have experienced quite heterogeneous impacts within the EU, which is of course unfortunate and is a big threat for the European energy market. The last point linked to acceleration of alternative sources, renewables and hydrogen. We support this pillar, of course, and we also there, what we are calling for is a regulatory framework that is combining push and pull measures. As an industry that is subject to the EU ETS, we are already subject to very stringent CO2 requirements, and with an increased carbon price that has reached 80, 90 euros in the last weeks and months. So that is already by itself a strong incentive for decarbonization. There we are concerned by the fact that the promotion of alternative fuels such as hydrogen in sectors like industry is pushed mainly through stick measures, command and control measures like renewable energy targets, rather than by support measures. So in that perspective, what we are missing as industry is support measures that create the business case for the implementation of hydrogen. And in that context, one should not only look at the, let's say, the comparison between these alternative energy sources and the traditional ones within Europe, but also when it comes to the international context. So our continued exposure to steel makers from third countries. In this perspective, that's also one effect of the war and its geopolitical implications when it comes to the role of gas as a transition fuel. What you need to know is that on average in Europe, we produce roughly 160 million tons of steel, of which around 100 million are primary steel and 60 million are secondary steel from steel scrap recycling. Now, the big challenge is to decarbonize mainly the 100 million tons of primary steel. This is produced using coking coal as a reducing agent and as an energy source. And this transformation relies mainly on the transition to new technologies. These new technologies will run mainly either on gas or on hydrogen. As an order of magnitude, the steel industry consumes today around 10 billion cubic meters of gas. Now, if we have projects for converting around 30% of the primary sites in Europe by 2030, so in the next 7-8 years. Converting all of them to gas would require 6 more additional billion cubic meters. And of course, this is far challenging in this new international context of limiting gas consumption. On the other side, if you want to replace it with hydrogen, there you will need only for steel almost 1.8 million tons of hydrogen only for these 50 steel projects. As I said, for the uptake of hydrogen in these projects, you need support measures for the infrastructure, because this is something completely unprecedented. So we have steel sites that have their own energy infrastructure fully in line with the existing industrial assets. And so if you switch from coking coal to hydrogen and renewable hydrogen, there you will need massive investments around and within the steel site. So there it's very important. And what we are still missing is some level of prioritization of this hydrogen use in sectors where it would deliver the highest abatement in terms of emissions. So we know that at least in the first years of the transition towards hydrogen, there needs to be some control or some regulatory measures that favor the use of hydrogen where it delivers more CO2 abatement. And we believe that still, in particular, the transition from primary to H2 based steel would deliver the best, let's say, abatement potential. So for that, I think we need some more fine-tuning in the measures that have been proposed. And last but not least, we need also what was said before, a continued effort to ensure more market integration. The big risk that we are seeing is higher fragmentation within the EU, which of course goes in the opposite direction. So from that perspective, we consider the short-term alleviation measures of the temporary crisis framework a good starting point, but the Commission. But for sure, more coordination by the member states is necessary to integrate them. So that's, in a nutshell, our preliminary views, and of course, I'm happy to contribute more later on.
Thank you, Adolfo. And I see also we're starting to get some questions in the chat, so we'll certainly bring those in later during the webinar. But thanks a lot for this this view from the specific case of the steel sector, which is under a lot of pressure, of course. And I think you've very successfully put kind of REPowerEU in the larger context of the steel sector and what it's going through. So that's been very helpful. Thanks for that. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll start with a discussion round with our speakers. And what I'd like to do here is, so you've given us kind of your specific points related to your expertise, your sectors. I'd like to zoom out a little bit and get your different views on a big picture question about REPowerEU. And so that question is essentially, REPowerEU is aimed at addressing 3 challenges at once. On the one hand, affordability of energy, which has come up quite a few times already. On the other hand, reducing reliance on Russian energy, and as well accelerating the energy transition towards climate neutrality. So 3 challenges at once, 3 challenges which none of them are easy, of course. So to what extent does REPowerEU, in your view, provide the policies, the targets, the tools that we need to address these challenges? And are all of these challenges equally addressed? What challenges might need further attention? If you could kind of delve a little bit into that from each of your areas, that would be fantastic. And I think we'll start in the same order as we did before. So Agatha, would you like to take the floor first?
Yes, huge question and huge task to address all these challenges. Well, actually, these are 3 pillars of any energy policy: affordability, sustainability, and security of supply. And Russian energy and decreasing dependence on Russian energy is right now about maintaining secure and stable supplies to the market. And so all that requires a, let's say, grand strategy. And also, if we take into account that Europe works under pressure and needs to address both immediate problems and longer-term challenges, all that makes this task even more complicated. And so I think REPowerEU is trying to address all these challenges. And what is difficult is to tackle interdependencies between them, and also the challenge is that what is happening right now may in fact significantly reshape your energy landscape. And we need such a strategy that will design this reshape and implement under pressure, not only of time, but also economic crisis, continued war, security risks, etc., etc. So what I think is that we need a clear differentiation of short and longer term goals, prioritization of some actions that are implementable in short term, as we heard in presentations before, and probably more EU both European Commission and coordination and less individual actions in immediate and short term. And it's because most analyses show that you could survive a big total cut of Russian gas supplies, but only if it stays united, coordinated, and is able to maintain solidarity, redistribute alternative supplies, manage flows, share the burden, etc. And this is a hard task. So yeah, that's what I could say.
Thank you, Agatha. We'll move to Anna then. Anna, what is your view on kind of three corners of the triangle, let's say?
Yes, well, actually, it's a very good question, Marie, and it tackles the energy trilemma: affordability, energy security, but also energy transition, which is very difficult to manage in the context currently. What I can say is the REPowerEU plan definitely tries to tackle security of supply and also energy transition. It is difficult to establish quite yet how the affordability of energy is going to be managed. Actually, I think it should be one of the priorities for regulators and member states to ensure a just transition and to make sure this plan tackles the three levers. I think the REPowerEU plan definitely presents opportunities through very ambitious proposals to accelerate investments and to make Europe a more resilient and clean Europe in terms of the energy system. But to achieve these objectives, I emphasize the importance of striking a balance between environmental, social, and industrial dimensions, ensuring a just transition. We need to reflect really on whether it is realistic to entrust the recovery from the energy crisis accompanied by the acceleration of the energy transition without taking into account all paths that make decarbonization possible, or the role of natural gas and oil that they will play, continue to play for the many years to come. So answering your question, I think we still have a few challenges to cover with the new plan published, and we'll see in the coming weeks and months how this is also developed.
Thank you, Anna. Adolfo, would you like to add to this?
Yes, I would say I broadly agree with Anna, and in the sense that it's inevitable that in the current geopolitical context, the priority went for security of energy. This is really a completely unprecedented situation. It's also somehow an acceleration for a more Europeization of energy. We knew that we were in Europe having an unbalanced distribution of competencies when it comes to energy, and this crisis is really showing the potential of improvement that we have, and of course it's unfortunate to do that in this context. On sustainability of energy, I would say there the EU was already well equipped due to the existing climate and energy framework that Europe has been developing over time. I mean, we already had the 2020 targets, 2030 targets, the climate neutrality, the climate law. So I think this is putting on sustainability, the REPowerEU is mainly taking up what is already existing in the legislation and trying to put it in the, of course, in the new context. When it comes to affordability, there I think it's inevitable to discuss short-term measures and more structural measures that might be necessary. In short term, it is clear that EU needs to work with the current distribution of competences. This is why you have mainly stated rules from the Commission and possibility by member states to implement them. At the same time, some reflection about the functioning of the energy markets and the framework of the energy markets should be launched. there has been, as you certainly know, first, let's say, pressure to have a discussion about the functioning of the electricity market, for instance. And this is an opportunity at least to have a deeper assessment of the current situation and evaluate what kind of measures might be needed for that. On affordability, for instance, what we are still finding not sufficient is the framework for PPAs by industry, which are extremely, I mean, they have been growing if you compare it to the past, so this is the positive note. But on the negative side, if it's compared to the overall size of the energy consumption by industry, they still remain a limited exception. Even more in the large energy consuming sectors like steel. So these kind of aspects need a deeper reflection and ad hoc measures to be promoted further.
Thank you, Adolfo. A big question, I know. So thank you for your input on such a difficult question. Of course, it will not be resolved right here, right now, but your input is most valued. So we have started to receive some questions here via the chat, which I'll start to bring in. And I'll start with one about solidarity mechanisms, which is by John Matsura. So John asks, the European Union has regulations that talk about solidarity mechanisms and risk groups in the case of gas supply outages. He asks, why haven't the European Union and the member states implemented these plans? Agatha, would you like to jump in on this?
So yes, indeed, the European Union has regulation on security of gas supply, which lays ground for solidarity mechanism to be used. It's worth remembering that these regulations, the rules, foreseen interruption of gas supplies, but to the group of countries or to a country, but not to a EU as whole. So the situation right now we are heading towards is a bit different. Then I think these interruptions foreseen were never thought to last forever, which can also be the case. So the situation is graver than foreseen in regulations, but these regulations are being amended, and I know that gas coordination group is meeting very often, more often than once a week probably in current situation, but we don't really have the full feedback of their discussions. So that I hope somehow at least addresses the question by Mr. Matsura.
Thank you, Agatha. Great. So we have some questions coming in as well on hydrogen, and this is a point that both Anna and Adolfo touched on in their presentations. So the question is, if we want to produce 10 megatons of green hydrogen by 2030, we need to install 500 terawatt hours of renewable electricity just for Horizon, for Horizon 2020, I want to say, for hydrogen, and we need 1,000 times more in electrolyzer capacity. Is this realistic? Big question. Anna, would you like to jump in?
Yes, it's actually a very good question, and I think all the industry is sort of having the same thoughts to what point this objective is realistic. It's certainly very, very ambitious. From the renewable generation, also from as the participant is stating, also from the electrolyzer capacity, but also from the capex necessity to invest in the industry. This is why also the industry needs clear signs and flexible signs to be able to ramp up and start boosting this industry, which obviously is one of the primarily objectives, but it's certainly a big challenge. Still, the REPowerEU plan has just been published, and we're still analyzing how we can do this, and certainly this point is one of the major challenges. Is it really realistic? Obviously, it's very, very ambitious, and we'll have to see in the short term how we can facilitate the deployment of such huge ambition target.
Thank you. And an important point, Adolfo, did you also want to contribute?
Yeah, I would say this is part of what I was saying in the first intervention. So this is where the top-down, let's say, political assessment of what must be done requires a bottom-up technical assessment of what is feasible and what can be done. It is definitely something unprecedented. So it is not something where Europe has experienced so far. We will be part of that challenge. As I was saying, if today you want to switch from a blast furnace, so from the current technology for primary steel, you are, from an electricity point of view, you are energy independent because you take all your energy from your coking coal, you produce electricity, you produce waste gases, so you are energy independent. If you want to switch to alternative sources, so to hydrogen, you will need electricity for this hydrogen production. So only in steel we will be needed between 3 and 5 times more electricity than what we are currently consuming. So for that, I think what Europe needs as part of the follow-up of the REPowerEU is also a deeper feasibility assessment and also a gap assessment, so that we are better prepared for these kind of questions and also to find concrete solutions for them. Our concern is that you might have some countries or some regions within countries that are better suited for this challenge and which can have a higher speed. But as the Commission always say, nobody should be left behind. So they also need to look at the local context where availability of renewables is more limited and what kind of support measures can be provided in those regions and countries.
Thank you, Adolfo. And I'm happy to announce as well that Tatiana Marquez of the European Commission has been able to join us. So thanks so much for joining us, Tatiana. I know in a terribly busy agenda. So Tatiana Marquez is, of course, of the European Commission. She is in the cabinet of Kadri Simpson and has extensive experience both in competition, energy, and climate policy. So Tatiana, thanks so much for joining us. Let me just bring you shortly up to speed. So we have been discussing essentially REPowerEU from the areas of expertise of our 3 speakers. So we have Agatha with us, who has been talking to us about essentially geopolitical part of the question, the dependence on Russian gas and what effect some of the measures might have, the solidarity issues with REPowerEU. We have Anna with us from, of course, Repsol, who has been telling us essentially about some of the short-term measures and some of the technological options that should be taken into account to make sure that they can be implemented as effectively as possible. And then we have Adolfo, who has been discussing with us the difficult situation of the steel sector, of course, and how REPowerEU fits into their equation and what kind of technologies and processes are being looked at from that angle. So as you can see, we've got a lot of different discussion points going on. We're really happy that you could join us. Would you like to kind of jump in here and give us a bit of your views on REPowerEU, where it stands right now, how the process is going?
Sure, with pleasure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry to only be able to join you at the very end. I was just coming from a meeting with my commissioner and with the executive vice president Timmermans, precisely on the issue of one of the topics that are raised in the REPowerEU plan that we adopted on the 18th of May, which is the issue of the joint purchase of energy and the creation of an energy platform that would allow us to buy that energy in the coming months. Since you have been talking a lot about REPowerEU, I'm not gonna explain all the context in which this is happening, but I want to remind one idea that for us is very important. REPowerEU is about phasing out fossil fuels from Russia in a record time. So we want to do it at the latest by 2030, but in reality, we know that it's going to happen much earlier, just simply because of a number of issues. Just yesterday, the Russians, they decided that they were not going to provide anymore certain companies in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Germany with gas that they had agreed under long-term contracts. This had already happened in Finland, in Bulgaria. So this is a kind of a trend that is linked to the obviously the companies' compliance with the European Union guidance about how to pay gas in long-term contracts through euros and dollars, and not through rubles as requested by the Russian government. So it's something that is accelerating even more the phasing out of fossil fuels. And secondly, there are also, whenever it is possible, companies, we are seeing that private companies are also restricting themselves from buying fossil fuels from Russia, even if they could, because they are not covered with sanctions, or they could do it through legal means. So this is a process that is going to take a little bit of time, that is going to probably going to accelerate due to the developments that are ongoing, but that at the same time is very much entrenched into our objective, which existed already before the Ukrainian war, which was the decarbonization of our economy. And the two processes, so the phasing out of fossil fuels from Russia on the one hand, and the decarbonization of the European economy, are very much linked. Indeed, the way we think is that the objectives that we have of reduction of greenhouse gases emissions by 2030 and by 2050 are going to be reached again much quicker. Because what we are doing with REPowerEU is not just to replace the existing Russian gas and Russian coal and oil that we were buying until now from Russia with fossil fuels coming from elsewhere. A part of it, obviously, it will be, because we need that fossil fuels in a transition period. But a very important part of the 155 BCMs that we have been importing in the last year of gas from Russia, they are going to be replaced by renewable energy. They are going to be replaced by hydrogen in the future. They're going to be replaced with biogas, biomethane. And we are going to do also, we expect to do massive amount of energy efficiency and energy savings in the coming months. So I do think that the two processes very much are interlinked and reinforce each other mutually. So that is maybe the first idea I wanted to pass. The second one is that we calculate that, unfortunately, not all the gas that we have been receiving until now from Russia would be able to be phased out, as I said, in the first years. It will take some time, even if we accelerated it as much as possible. And this basically requires from the member states also a very important work of preparation for the next winter and the next winters, in terms of updating their contingency plans in case of full disruption from Russian gas, in case of deciding, what kind of industries, what kind of consumers which are not protected according to EU legislation, we need to maybe be curtailed in some hours or in some days where there will be problems of provision of gas. It will need a lot of coordination and solidarity among member states. And we have already, since several years, indeed since 2014, a gas coordination group where member states are sitting and where they discuss these issues concerning solidarity, the problems that they have with the supply of gas, how they can help each other, how to be better prepared for contingency, solidarity agreements among them so that they can have access to gas infrastructure like storage or LNG terminals that they do not have themselves, but maybe their neighbors they have, and they can rely on them. So this is something that we are very much stepping up during these months of crisis. And the new kid in town is obviously the energy platform that we created some weeks ago, and that is formed by member states and the Commission, and meets regularly in order mainly to work in three main areas. The first one is to aggregate demand, so to have more information about how much energy we need, mainly gas at this first moment, but we hope that in the future it will also be green hydrogen demand that could be aggregated. So we try to see very much how much quantities we will need first, in order to be able to, at the second point, reach out alternative supplier of gas in third countries, and pass with them agreements, memorandum of understanding that could fix for the member states who are interested, and the companies in those member states that are interested could fix volumes of gas to be bought by the EU as a whole, and probably also reference prices. And then leave to obviously to the companies to pass the contracts themselves with the suppliers. Second area where the platform is working is infrastructure, so having much more real data about what kind of infrastructure for transport of gas is available at the moment. LNG, I give you an example. Klaipėda LNG terminal in Lithuania, it's fully booked for next year, but at the same time we know that last year it was only used at 70% of the capacity. So basically there is a 30% gap where in reality the capacity was booked but was not used. So there is still quite a lot of inefficiencies in the way that we are using the existing energy infrastructure that we have. So this is working on IT tools, on the best tools to know in real time what capacity is available and how in the secondary market infrastructure can be freed also for those who need that capacity to import gas, is also one of the topics that we are working on. And thirdly, the platform will also look into how to coordinate better the outreach that we do to third country suppliers, to very much ensure that we have the best possible prices, the best possible conditions for the gas that we will be buying in the coming months. What we are saying to these countries at the moment is, you can imagine many of them, they do not like so much our decarbonization objectives, and they would like that we continue buying them gas for a very long time. What we tell them is, well, look, we will still need your gas for some years, maybe not as long as the time that you would have liked, but what we offer you in return is to bring you along a new market, which is the green hydrogen market, to cooperate with you on technology, on hydrogen technology, because many of these countries, the good thing is that they do not only have gas, but they also have very high potential of renewable electricity production, and therefore of renewable hydrogen production. And we are interested in future to buy that gas, because the focus of the EU now is to decarbonize not only the electricity grid, but also the gas network with biomethane and green hydrogen. I want to stop there because it has already been a bit longer than I expected to talk, and I'm very much happy to enter the discussion and reply to your questions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tatiana, for this update on a lot of the points that are going on. I mean, it's a very fast-moving crisis, of course. I can only imagine that it must be busy days in Brussels. And also in your intervention, you've answered a few of the questions or connected to a few of the questions we've been getting from our audience. So that's wonderful. So I noted down kind of to summarize your update on the payment issue, the most recent developments on that. I noted your points on the solidarity mechanism, which has also come up earlier in the webinar, and on the energy platform, as well as on energy relations. So what I'll do right now is I'll bring in a question from our audience for you, Tatiana. And after that, what I'll do is I'll open up for a round to our panelists to react to the points that you've made, and also to kind of highlight what they see as the priority points, probably related to REPowerEU and the current crisis. And I think that will allow us to kind of complete the circle to some extent, and then Tatiana, perhaps you could react at the end once again if you'd like. So the question that I'll bring in at this point is by Juan Arroyo Asencio, and he's bringing up a point which which I think is on the mind of many. He's asking whether it is compatible to stop dependence on Russia, but also to have cheap energy. And so he's concerned of importing natural gas from countries such as the US, where the prices are higher. So can we balance out 2 points of that energy triangle, that energy trilemma in the midst of this crisis? That's not an easy question, I know, but would you like to give us your thoughts on that? Tatiana, are you?
Yeah, no problem. No, it's a very fair point, and I think that we should not fool ourselves. Certainly, we have been relying on a third country supplier, which is Russia, which has allowed us to have access to relatively cheap gas because it was coming from pipeline, and it's always easier and cheaper to have access to gas through pipeline than through LNG. And basically we are restricting ourselves from buying a cheap source of gas. Is a strategic decision, a strategic political decision that has been taken by EU leaders to do this. We don't promise that the prices will be lower than before the Ukraine war started. We do not promise that we are going to go back to an era of cheap gas prices. I think this is out of questions. European Union is a price taker in the gas market. The gas prices are settled in the global market, and it's not settled by us. But nevertheless, the European Union is buying around 25% of the gas in the world, and this means that we have an important purchasing power that could be used if we buy jointly as an important way of getting prices that are probably lower than what the member states individually could obtain if they were going to negotiate contracts on their own. Also, as I said, because here we are trying to open up the discussion with the third countries. We are not only trying to buy LNG gas or gas pipeline. We are trying to bring hydrogen also into the picture, but also renewable electricity, for instance, with countries with whom we have electricity interconnections. And where we are offering here is, well, we want to have a long-term partnership with you, not just in terms of gas purchasing, but also hydrogen purchasing in the future. And we think that putting all these elements together, the conditions would be better than if we buy gas individually. But of course, as I said at the beginning, I think the times of cheap gas are over.
Thank you, Tatiana. Important points regarding our energy relations and as well regarding kind of our strength as the European Union as a whole. So I'm afraid that Agatha has had to leave us, but Ana, Adolfo, perhaps we can take this moment for a kind of round of reactions, final points that you'd like to make related to priorities related to REPowerEU. Ana, would you like to start?
Thank you, Marie. Yeah, just quickly, because we are a little bit over the time. As I said during my intervention, I think REPowerEU definitely presents opportunities through very ambitious proposals. And I would like to highlight the importance of the member states on how to deploy the plan within Europe. I think there's great opportunities here, but they need to be cascaded down. And through the recovery and resilience plans, it's a great chance to boost the plan and also assure that all technologies play an important role through this decarbonization objective and also the independence from Russian fossil fuels. So yeah, those two, I would say, that would be my main points to finish up.
Thanks a lot, Adolfo.
In a nutshell, 2 points. For very, very short term, continue, improve and strengthen the monitoring and reaction crisis management, because situation can evolve very fast and measures can adjust very fast. And then on a more structural note, please try to introduce a much more consumer-friendly perspective in the EU energy policy. So we have seen a lot of measures going towards promotion of alternative production fuels. But what we also need is measures that promote those fuels from a consumer perspective, so from the industrial perspective. So accelerating investments also on the demand side of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Adolfo, for these very short points. Tatiana, would you like to say any final words before we wrap up our webinar? Sorry, you're on mute.
Yes. No, I just wanted to maybe stress again the point that I made at the very beginning. It is important that in this big challenge that we have in the years ahead of us, the EU countries continue being together, not just buying gas, which is something that will be in any case a voluntary thing for member states, but more importantly, united in basically finding also alternative to Russian gas, and continue advancing and speeding up in the decarbonization agenda. So taking energy efficiency and savings seriously. Explaining also to the population that the support that we are giving to Ukraine in these days have consequences from the gas market perspective, also regarding gas prices, and that there are a certain number of decisions, sometimes difficult, that will need to be made in the coming months. But it will be worthy trying, because what we present in REPowerEU as a future, as an energy future policy for Europe, a future vision, is the replacement of imported fossil fuels with domestically produced renewable energy, which will create growth and jobs for people in Europe, and in the medium to long term, we also think it will also bring prices back down. We have seen in the last decades how the entrance of renewable electricity has brought wholesale electricity prices down. We should see the same also in the gas market if we continue in this path.
Thank you, Tatiana, for these final words, bringing together, I think, the three kind of frames of time, so the short, mid, and long, and also the three angles, the three challenges, really, of affordability, sustainability, and, of course, security of supply. So thanks so much to our speakers. Thank you for joining us today, for talking about these initial reflections on a very, very big plan, which clearly, of course, is going to develop further, also in function of day-to-day developments at this point. So thanks for your reflections for this. Thank you also to our sponsor, to Repsol, for their support for this event. And thank you to the audience for their questions. I'll invite our audience as well to reconnect with us soon for more webinars on the energy transition and on, of course, current energy policy in the EU. Thanks a lot and see you soon.